Alright, so we want our player to be able to pick up this projectile, this little lightning bolt in the level, and be able to throw it at these enemies and kill them with it. But there's a little bit of a challenge in how to carry that out. So basically, your player is a game object, and this little projectile is a game object. What we need to happen is for the player to, whenever he comes in contact with that it's going to say, okay, you've got it, and now it's going to have to destroy that game object to ensure that we don't keep that on the map, right? So let's see if we can knock that out real quick. So we got to go to our player prefab. So first of all, go to your scenes and load up level 4, and then go to your player prefab, and on your player prefab we're going to add yet another variable called has projectiles, right? We're going to add that, and then we're going to give it a true or false statement. So your Boolean is false. So does it have the projectile? No, it does not. So what we're going to have to do is we set that up, go ahead and override that, and that should be good to go. Now that we have done that, we need to, when we interact with this object, we need it to go away from the map and check that to yes, like, hey, he's got it. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is go to our level. We're going to go to projectile pickup. If you look here, this little projectile has a particle effect on it, so it just like sits there and glimmers. I think that looks really super cool. Hopefully I'll know how to do that very soon. Don't know how to do that yet, but I'm going to check into that. So anyway, we're going to apply a new flow macro to that. I think I actually had done this before and I messed up, so I went back to do a new component or new tutorial on this. So let's assume that wasn't there. Now let's go to a flow machine. So you're going to add a flow machine to that, and there is going to be a macro for that. We're going to call that projectiles pickup. So this little macro is going to be under our macro system. Actually, I think I messed up, so I didn't put it in the macro folder. So it'll go into your asset. If you ever did that, drag it into your macros folder, and so now it'll be right there. And in this, what we're going to do is when it comes in contact with our player, we want it to set that has projectiles object variable that we put on our player to true, and we want that to destroy itself. So how you do that is let's do our easy when you come in collision with macro there. When you come in collision with player, I want you to do something. So you're going to set the variable set the object variable of has projectiles for this object to, so we'll do Boolean, set it to true. When a player collides with you, set the has projectiles Boolean to true, and then I want you to destroy game object, destroy yourself. So that when the player comes in contact with it, that should allow us to, when you pick that up, that it will destroy itself. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a projectile that when we throw the projectile, we want it to hit the enemies. Just really quickly, let's see if we can check this and make sure this works. It might not work yet. Ah, there it goes. So it destroyed itself, and if you look on the player, it says under the projectiles, true. So it did fix that for us, and then it went off to false when we reset the level. So that's what we needed it to do. Now let's make it to where we can throw that thing like a shuriken or a Chinese star, so a throwing star. So let's go to, in order to find this, because you're not going to find this in your level, you have to go to prefabs and go find that projectile item. And then what we're going to do to that is we're going to add a component to that. We're going to add a flow machine. but it wants to embed it on the tutorial. I'm gonna go ahead and do it because I want you to see what problems I was running into, and I'm gonna show you how I think, if I remember correctly, how I fixed it to where it was working correctly. This was the most frustrating part of the entire tutorial for me. Once I finally figured it out, it was pretty simple. So hopefully you don't run into the issues that I had. So when we launch that thing, we want it to do three things. So first of all, we want it to launch. Second, we want it to rotate, and third, we want it to kill the enemy when it comes in contact with it. So this is the way we're going to do that. So let's start with the start event. So on start, I want you to be able to launch, right? So we're going to set the velocity of a rigid body 2D, because that's an object and it's going to come in contact with something else. So I want you to set the velocity of that by creating a vector 2, and I believe it is an XY vector 2. And how we're going to get that, so let's back up a little bit. We're going to have get the variable object, get the object variable direction, and there's not one yet, so it doesn't like that. It's like, what the crap, there's no direction variable, what are you talking about? We're going to put one in. We're going to make one here in just a second. So it's going to start wigging out, and hopefully, you know, we can get through this. Multiply. So we're going to take the direction and we're going to multiply that by an integer. So a fixed number of come here, dude. Literal. This is the problem I was having. When you click this, as many times as you click, see, I clicked it twice, and 2 of those showed up and it didn't go away. Did it get 3 of them? Goodness. Is that right? So that one I didn't need. This is the only one I need. I don't know why, but when you're working with embedded macros, for some reason it was doing this to me on every time. It's very frustrating, and every time you touch something, well, you get a new argument. And I think if you look over here, yeah, we got 13 arguments so far. Whenever we move something, it goes up by 2. I never figured out a way to fix that when working with embedded. We're going to go ahead and do it now, so if you're seeing that, don't worry. We can get it fixed here in just a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the direction, and we're going to launch this on the x-axis. So it's saying take the direction and multiply it times 8, because we want it to move 8 frames per second when it goes across the room. So if you want it to go faster, you'll take that up. If you want it to go slower, you'll turn that down. And we're going to create a vector 2 momentum out of that. So we're going to set the velocity of the x by 8. And then what we're going to do is we want you to destroy yourself after a certain amount of frames. We don't just want this thing spinning on forever. We want you to, if you don't hit anything after a while, to destroy yourself after some time passes. So we're going to destroy yourself after 10 seconds. So if 10 seconds pass and you still haven't hit anything, then just get rid of yourself, destroy yourself, right? So this is the launch. So let's figure that out real quick. I'm going to call this launch. Launch bolt. So that's doing something. We'll make that green because I like that. What did you just do? You turkey. Alright, here we go. Green. Dude, it does not like that. It's something to do with that embedded. Every time I get to this part, it messes up. Whatever. We'll leave it. Rotation. So we want it to rotate, right? So we're going to update every frame. We need you to rotate. So let's get you to transform rotate on X, Y, and Z angle. And so the X and the Y is going to be set a certain way. But on the Z angle, we want you to rotate every second So the reason why you do this, according to the tutorial, and I did click that, it just didn't show up, and that's, again, you start messing with this thing and it starts being stupid. I don't know why it's doing that. So let me finish this real quick. We'll explain what this per second is according to the tutorial, as in the way I understand it. Multiply. All right, so we're gonna get our object variable direction. So we're gonna launch this in a direction, and we're gonna spin it in a direction. Multiply that times an integer. And their integer here is 1000. That's the way they have it set up in the tutorial, and I believe that's how quickly it spins around on the z-axis. Alright, so apparently when you set up something like this, a rotate per frame, faster computers are going to update their frames more quickly than slower computers. And so in order to get around that we want this thing to rotate for everybody equally, you put in this little per second thing. So we want this to happen per second, 1,000 times per second, and then it's able to carry out that rotation on the z angle. So that is essentially why it's set up that way. According to them, I guess somebody figured out how to fix that or edit that into Bolt. That's what that tutorial says. So there's your rotate. And hopefully this will let me move it, even if it won't let me change its color. You turd. Anyway, all right. So and then we need, last thing, we need our lightning bolt to hit when it hits an enemy. So let's go to our macro. On collision with an enemy. So anything that is tagged enemy, because remember your enemy is tagged as an enemy. So anytime you come in contact with, oh man, I messed it up. Where was I at? Projectile, right? So we got to go to your prefab, go to your projectile. All right. So anytime you come in contact or collision with an enemy, I want you to trigger a custom event. And what event are we going to do? We're going to do the death event. And I believe we're going to explain what that is in just a minute when we set up our death animation or our death event for our enemy. So when it comes in contact with this thing, then set off the death event for that object. Alright, and so after you hit them and they die, you need to destroy yourself. Or you could just keep sending it through objects, depending on what you want to do. Like you want a bullet to go through something really quickly and it'll slow down over time. You know, that's on you. But we want you to destroy yourself according to this tutorial. And so this is going to be your defeat enemy. And when that happens, we want you to destroy yourself. So that's what that's doing. Now we got the three aspects of our projectile. And now what we need to do is we need to, in our player, so let's go ahead and go to this. So we were working on the prefab, so we don't have to update anything. So anytime it gets instantiated in a prefab or in a level, that's what it's going to do on that object. So let's go to our player on player 4, and let's look at our player controller. And what we're going to do is we're going to add one more object in here. We're going to call, we're going to tell the player to be able to throw it when it has the projectiles set to true, right? So let's do on button event, on button input of the name of fire 1. So again, just checking this real quick. Project settings. Sorry, it's not project settings. Is it? Yeah, it is project settings. Under project settings, input manager, you should have a fire 1 set to left control or your mouse click 0. So that's your left mouse click. So when you click fire 1 under that input manager, and it goes down, when you click down, not hold it or when you let up. So when you click down on it, it's going to do something. What do we want it to do? Well, first of all, we need a branch here because there's a condition to that. We need a get variable, get object variable of, remember we put this on our player, has projectiles. So when has projectiles is set to true. So when that is true, when it has it, we're going to set a branch because there is a condition and it's true or false. When this is true, whenever he has it and it's true, then what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate that projectile from him. So instantiate means to create something out of thin air. So we're going to instantiate this component, and what we need is original, position, and rotation. So the object we are going to instantiate, you can click this little drop down menu and figure out where it is in here, but I see it right over here, so I'm going to come grab it from right here onto prefabs. We're going to grab this projectile and we're going to launch it, right? So we want to instantiate that coming from the player. We want to create that out of thin air, and then we are going to get the position of yourself. So where are we going to instantiate it? On the player. And we are going to get the rotation by get identity. This is the rotation identity. The reason why you need that is because we want to rotate it and it doesn't know where to start. So apparently that's why you have to plug that in there. So we want to do that, and we're going to set the variable, set the object variable of direction on that projectile. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to have to figure out which x vector location it's going to be. So if you're facing the left, we need it to go left. If you're facing right, we need it to go right. So the way that you do that is, let's back up a little bit. You're going to get the local scale. So I'll show you what this is grabbing just real quick. The local scale is the local scale of the player, and if you remember, whenever he's facing to the left, it's going to go negative, remember? So because we change it that he flips on the x-axis whenever he goes left, and he stays that way, or he's going to go right and it's going to go positive. So what it's doing is it's grabbing that number. So get local scale on yourself, just on the x. Get x. We don't need the x, y, and z. We just need the x of the vector 2, and that is the direction you're going to launch yourself. So this right here, let's call this fire, lightning, bolt. That is going to be, I'm going to make that condition green. Yeah, alright, so it actually changed colors. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so this is something that's happening off the player. We're going to fire this projectile, sorry. And that is how that is going to work. So the last thing we need to do is we need to implement when our player hits these guys. So if we go in here, this should work correctly. When the projectile hits the enemies, whoop, yeah, it's hitting the enemies, but it ain't killing them. It's knocking them back a little bit. Like, get off, get off, get off, get off, get off, get off. Ha. We want it to be able to hit it and kill the enemy, not just, you know, like hit him in the head, right? So the way we do that is we're going to go, first of all, go to set your override on your player. Did we do that on our player? Oh, we did it on the controller. We did it on the controller, not the player itself. So we're good. That's going across all of the players. So last thing we're going to do is we're going to implement the death state on the enemy. So if you remember this, now we had a live state with several aspects of that. Now we need a dead state for that. So the way we're going to do that, basically when this object hits the enemy and it dies, we need it to stop moving. We need it to stop colliding with anything so that it falls down. We need it to become semi-transparent, so when you hit it, you know you hit it, So it's kind of like one of those effects that you know you hit it because it went semi-transparent. And the other thing is we want it to switch back to its idle animation. We don't want it walking while it's dying. And self-destruct after about 5 seconds after you hit it. So the way that we're going to do this, and if you look at the script on this, it looks really super complicated, but it really is not that difficult to understand. This is the part that throws me most of the time. But it's really not that hard to figure out how this thing is working. What we're going to do is we are going to enter into our dead state and keep the on enter state and get rid of everything else. So on enter state, we need 5 things to happen. So the way you do that is to do a sequence of 5 steps. 5 different things are going to happen when you enter the death state. We're going to set velocity 2D. Oh goodness, what is the matter with you? Set velocity 2D. Alright, rigid body 2D, set velocity. Goodness gracious. We need you to set that to 0. So stop moving. That's what that just told that to do. We need you to disable your box collider. This one took me a minute to find, if I remember correctly last time. Set your box collider to 0. So disable that box collider 2D on yourself. And we want to change the color. So we're going to change your color to a transparency. So set color for the sprite renderer. And I think this one also took me a while to find. So let me just go back. Sprite renderer. Set color of the sprite renderer. There we go. And we want to set that to a transparent color. So I want to set it to about, let's set it to 100. Just type in that number right there. So it's going to go mostly transparent, but we'll still see it when you hit it. And we also want to tell it to go to the idle animation so it's not trying to walk while it's dying. So set float animation to speed to 0. So we want that speed in the animator of the enemy to go to 0, because when it goes to 0, it'll automatically send it back into idle. So we want that to happen whenever it dies. And the last thing is we want you to destroy components after a set amount of time, which is the difference between destroy and destroy T there. After 5 seconds, we want you to destroy yourself. So that's the death animation. This is, again, there's a lot happening there, but when you know how to read it according to the sequence, it's really not that hard to figure out. So death sequence. All right, and I'm gonna leave it black because that's what death is like, black. All right, and we also, just to throw in a little thing there in the tutorial they said, we also kind of want it to spin when it dies. So we're going to do an update. I told you to delete that just a second ago. You didn't have to. Update. And we want you to rotate. Rotate on the XYZ angle. So you are going to rotate. So the self is going to rotate on the Z-axis of 720 degrees per second. Oh, per second. Sorry. 720 degrees. And we'll make that, oops, we'll make that spin on death. And because it's doing something, I like to make it green. But we could have made it death, black, stay with the theme. Whatever. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need our enemy to transition into death. And the way that we're going to do that is you just double click on that, and we have a custom event that we made. If you remember, we did death. We'll go back and find that in just a second. But the way this is going to happen is when you get hit with that projectile, it is going to trigger the death animation. So you will be dead, and all those things will happen when you die. So I believe it was on the projectile. Is that right? We wanted it to kill the enemy, right? So we made a custom trigger of death, and it comes out on the enemy. So going to the enemy, it comes out right there. So there you go. So let's see if we need to override anything. We don't, because that was on a macro that was on all the way across the board. So now that should work. But we have one more thing that we want to do with the projectile, and that is that when we pick it up, we want it to show up in our heads-up display. We want to see that in the HUD, right? Right now it's showing like we have it, and we want it to change when we throw it. Yeah, so, oops, can't jump. Oh my god, try again. There we go. So you notice they spin and they die and they go semi-transparent and fall. Like, yeah, it's just a little neat effect that we made it do. Alright, so but the last thing is we need our projectile when we pick it up to show up in our HUD, not before. So let's see if we can fix that real quick. What we're going to do is going to save this and go to our heads-up display. So where's our heads-up? So go to Scene, Heads-Up Display. And now we need, when we open this up, select the projectile object. We need that projectile to show up. So going to projectile, we're going to add a new flow machine. We are going to embed this one so that it just shows up. Again, it's a HUD, so it's just going to be in this one. I should have deleted that update. Let's do update. So every frame, we want you to check and see if you've got this object. If you do, we want to set the enabled image. Where's the image? Set enabled on the image of yourself. We want you to be active at that point. So let's see, check the player. So get variable. Learn how to spell. Variable, get the application variable of player. Again, that was just a really quick way to check that. Singleton principle. We want you to get variable, get the object variable this time of that. It's not going to let you do that because it was on the wrong thing. So you have to break that and send it to the bottom. And we're going to do has projectiles of the player. Does the player have the projectile? If so, then set enabled on that image. Otherwise, it's not going to show up. So that's pretty much it. Let's check and see if it works, that when we pick up this object, every frame it should be. Oh, you know what? I got to go to a level. John, that'll help. Right now, it's not showing up. So there is no player in that HUD. Let's go to level 4, and let's play it. And let's see if it shows up. Okay, so it's not showing. When we pick it up, we need it to show. Woohoo! It shows. We throw it at our enemies, and they go all crazy. Yeah, alright. So we now can get through our level, and that is pretty much all the gameplay aspect of this. Let me show you real quick. I know we're getting real long in this video. I knew it was going to be a longer one, but hey, we're almost done. There was one thing, and I don't know if you're encountering this, that was really frustrating me because this wasn't set up right. It took me a long time to figure this out. So just really quickly, if when you throw the object you are interacting with it, like right now it's not interacting. Let me show you what happens when you do interact with that object. And it took me a long time to figure out how to fix this. Going into project settings of physics 2D, if your player is set to interact with the projectile, that right there needs to be unchecked. Because if it's not unchecked, let's see what happens. Alright. You notice it pushes your player back a little bit? Watch what happens when I go left. It just sits there and spins into me, and you can like push it. Like, it took me forever to figure out why it was doing that. That's why. We have to have that set to off. So if you're encountering that problem, that is why. So go to Physics 2D with your player and your projectile object. Where's it at? Player projectiles. Make sure that's clicked off, or else your player is going to interact with that projectile object.